Thank you all for tuning in to today's FAIR webinar, which is quite a bit earlier than we usually schedule our webinars, but we're trying to accommodate the schedules of our very esteemed guests today. So I'm pleased to be joined by three panelists who all have something very important in common. They all challenge us to question the lens through which we see race and race relations in the United States. Our first guest is a luminary, and growing up, he was a living legend in my mind, it still is. He's one of the most forward-thinking intellectuals I know, Shelby Steele. Shelby's an author, a columnist, a documentary filmmaker, and a Robert J. and Marion E. Oster Senior Fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. For those of you who don't know, that is a very, very big deal. He specializes in the study of race relations, multiculturalism, and affirmative action. Shelby's written widely on race in American society and the consequences of contemporary social programs on race relations. Our second guest is Eli Steele, who is, coincidentally, Shelby's son and also an award-winning filmmaker. Eli is a graduate of Claremont McKenna College and Pepperdine University School of Public Policy. His career highlights include films called How Jack Became Black, What's Bugging Seth, and What Killed Michael Brown, which was his first professional collaboration with his father, Shelby. Eli is the winner of 10 film festivals, What Killed Michael Brown was the winner of 10 film festivals. And another film he also did was Katrina, an MTV network pilot, which won him the Breakthrough Filmmaker Award. Eli's written for publications ranging from the LA Times to Commentary Magazine. And our final guest is Ildi Tillman. She is a Hungarian photographer, author, educator, and a proud mother of two who currently lives in New York. Ildi has an MA in Africana Studies from SUNY University, Stony Brook. Her photography won recognition at several international competitions, and her work is exhibited all over the world, including New York and Barcelona. She writes frequently for the Journal of Free Black Thought, the Caribbean Quarterly, Root Quarterly, and other publications. And I'm happy to say she is among the inaugural winners of FAIR Artists Grant. Lastly, her current project, which I'm sure she'll tell us more about today, is about human life in the context of cliches and propaganda. And that project is being supported by a grant from the Shelby Steele Foundation. So thank you all for being here, all three of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
So when I think about the three of you and the work you do, what stands out to me is that what you each have in common is this fierce rejection of the racialized perception of identity, pushing back on the narrative that race and even gender define who we are, and how we see each other and how we see the world. So Shelby, I'd like to start with you, and by asking you to talk about a concept that I think you coined. I don't think I heard it for anyone else. I think it started with you, poetic truth. And it's a phenomenon, if I'm understanding this correctly, that you've identified that basically talks about taking poetic license to bend our social reality in the pursuit of power. And it's a phenomenon that I would add also further societal division, whether intentionally or otherwise. So can you give us more, I guess, more detail at a granular level about the concept of poetic justice, how it has influenced and even defined Black history, the Black experience, and race relations in America?
Well, I'll give it a stab.
Yeah, give it a stab.
But the use of the word poetic carries the idea of license, and so in a sense, it's a concept, the poetic truth of dealing of creating narratives. For example, about the strife that Blacks go through and gone through in America, narratives that tell a story, that bring to the storyteller a sense of entitlement, a sense of being a victim, Uh, use that different words, but in other words, it's a power move. Um, People who are good at con men are good at poetic truth. They will tell you a story uh, that uh, positions them to gain something, to get something from you. So I use it in that sense, and it is race relations. It seems to me has been just uh, I don't know. You need many words to describe, but it's been injured. The conversation is stunted and hesitant and so forth, um, because people get in trouble telling these narratives, and we fight and argue. Um, are blacks really suffering from a racism today? Well, there's some who say yes, absolutely. They have a very dim future. Others say no, that racism is over with. The doors are wide open. Well, which one of those narratives is true? Um, and, uh, and how does it affect the individual black or mixed, whatever, in terms of making decisions about their life and what they want to do and what they want to contribute and so forth. Um, so we don't have a language regarding race that is concrete and specific and immutable. We don't have that. So from my generation to your generation to each one changes things around and it's hard to keep up. But one thing we do know is that almost always the truths, the narratives that come out of the Black experience in America are are distorted
Mhm.
and again created to gain advantage rather than to reveal the truth. The language around races is avoidant and empty and it's Latinate language, ION, and so forth, and you don't get a sense of the experience of the Black Americans actually live.
Yeah, listening to you, you mentioned how this victimhood is actually kind of manifests to a sense of in a sense of power, because it's not only, I think you could argue that this poetic justice is being used not only by members of the white community, but members of the Black community as well. And I was thinking about it recently, like it's almost like the Black community has been disenfranchised and abused for many many years, and then we get civil rights, and our voice, we finally get a voice, and white people aren't just listening, they're encouraging us to speak up, but yet it still feels like we don't have power. And then we finally reach a point where we can do something that we've never been able to do before. We reached this point in the past 10 years or so where we can blame and shame white people openly for what they've done to us as much as we want. And then it becomes about, it's almost like taking back power, like blaming and shaming white people, making them feel as bad as they made us feel centuries ago, or maybe even decades ago. It's like the psychological power. And maybe it's in many ways, maybe it feels like it's the only power Black people, like we feel like we have, like that's this wielding guilt and shame, almost like a weapon, if that
I
makes
could
sense.
give you yeah, I
Oh,
could give you an example. So I was at this was 2013, I think, and I was filming the George Zimmerman trial with Trayvon Martin. And what was fascinating was they handed out these badges to all the young Black children there. And on it, it stated, "Am I next?" So the kids are walking around in hoodie, with the badge, with the I'm sorry, a button on the end. You just feel like, okay, what kind of message then you sending to them? I mean, the Trayvon Martin thing was a tragedy of itself,
yeah.
but you then take that tragedy, which is my father's idea of the poetic truth. It is always a little bit of truth there.
Mhm.
The Trayvon Martin, there's truth there.
always agree.
And then you extrapolate that across the whole population. And so that everybody's a bishop. And so that for me was probably the first time I really saw that, like up close. And this was also at the time that Obama was the president and the whole post-racial argument was happening. Oh, we have the first Black president, we are free of race. And then all of a sudden, boom, no, we're not. And that button for me was sort of, that's okay. So out of all of this, out of all the possibilities, that's the message that we pick.
Yeah.
And my next, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Obama was I'm glad you talked about Obama because I kept thinking at the time, how are we going to transcend race when every time someone thinks about him, it's the first Black president, not the first, like he's a Harvard educated guy, like he was a community organizer, whatever. He's just the first Black president. The fixation was ridiculous. All right, so I think I'd like to right now, if we could, turn to a subject that Shelby, you and Eli have devoted a great deal of attention to, and that's the death of Michael Brown. And for those of you who don't remember, Michael Brown was shot by police in Ferguson, Missouri in the spring of 2014. I just know it's 2014. Anyway, four years ago, Eli, you produced a documentary, Shelby, you narrated, about Michael's death. It's called What Killed Michael Brown. So Michael's death, which we're talking about, became a focal point for Black rage. But if you look deeper to understand why this was happening, you get people like Shelby and Eli realize that it touched on something very unique in race relations in America. And I think you both in this film explored this idea that, okay, white citizens of Ferguson, Missouri, were living under the accusation that they're racist and they were being demonized. This poor Black guy was shot by police in their community. But in reality, the circumstances surrounding his death were much different. So I'd like you each to speak to that. And Shelby, you can go first. What is the poetic justice in the framing of Michael Brown's death?
Well, if you go back for just a minute,
I'm sorry, the poetic truth. I misspoke.
Okay. Well, again, the poetic. Here's the basic story. Blacks we're a minority living within a country and a culture that oppressed us woefully for centuries, abused us in every conceivable way, tried to reduce our humanity to nothing. We were oppressed literally. Frederick Douglass had to learn to read, had to sneak and get a lantern and crawl under his master's house and teach himself to read in the middle of the night because blacks were not allowed to do that. When you create a society like that, and such that is a part of your history, not all of your history, but a part of it, you have some guilt. And it's our feeling that white guilt is today, now that white racism has begun to fade, that white guilt is really it is the primary motivation in race relations and government relations to race that we as Americans face. We're working, that guilt empowers us, as you say. You now have a power. When I was a kid, you could walk down the street and you knew you were going to be called the N-word by somebody. If you did that today, my God, the world would stop.
That certainly would.
And you would be licensed to do anything. And that constitutes power. That's the power that brought us President Johnson's Great Society. Trillions of dollars devoted to public housing, new schools, so forth and so on. We're worse off today by most statistics than we were back then. But we had the power. And so we have a big investment in poetic truth, in narratives that portray us as entitled, that portray us as victims of white bigotry, white evil. And of course, whites are not in a position to deny it because it's so blatantly true, and there's so many people who suffered through it and so forth. So there's no way out for whites. They have to come up with their own narratives. So today, for example, it's whites who are involved in fighting racism, who are leading the way. I look at them and I said, "Where were you 40 years ago when I really needed you?" But now, I say my message to blacks is that we have to move beyond the idea of ourselves as victims. Of course, when you do that, I'm called then an Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
So we play these rather silly games. And it's hard my point is, it's hard, given poetic truth, it's hard for the real truth to ever emerge. In my whole lifetime, I see glimpses of it here and there. But there's no comfortable relationship.
Yeah, what about Michael Brown? So how is it with Michael Brown?
How does
Michael,
this
how
Yeah,
does
so
it
how is
relate
it
to
with
Michael
Michael
Brown?
Brown?
How does this relate to Michael Brown, the
Michael Brown,
Yes.
a black kid killed by a white policeman, so the world blows up. Well, that's white guilt. Whites were more upset than blacks were. The truth, real truth, Michael Brown, who was, by the way, 300 pounds, and is confronting the policeman who stops him from walking down the middle of the street. He grabs the policeman, puts him in the car, beats him up, takes his gun, throws it back at him, walks away. Then he starts to charge the police car again. The policeman asks him to stop, so forth. Michael Brown does not stop. And within a matter of a few feet, the policeman pulls the trigger and kills him. Okay, is that racism? Well, boy, when I heard that it was this difference in skin color, white policeman, black teenager, you're gonna hear it for years. You're gonna hear poetic truth. What really happened, what we tried to unravel in our film, was what really happened. And all of the politics from the president on down were affected by Michael Brown's story. And in most cases in public, you supported the narrative of him as a victim, and you were acceptable. If you came into to talk to someone in the government or in social life and said something different, then you would be seen as adding to the oppression
Mhm.
of Black people. And so the perfect narrative there to carry the day. Not one bit of it was true.
Mm. You know,
But what was also
oh, yes,
uh,
go ahead, Eli.
what was if it's a small point, what was interesting was doing there was about this witnesses. There were quite a few witnesses who got public information. But this of them was at least this was 7 or maybe 8 were verified and actually credible by the DOJ, meaning they saw most of what happened. Some people saw part of it, but they all pretty much saw Michael Brown reach into Darren Wilson's car and 2 shots go off, and then Michael Brown then runs away, stop. And for some reason, he decides to turn around and charge the officer. So they started, and every major media, this is all public information, every journalist, everybody looked the other way. They decided to believe the activist. They believe one witness Dorian Johnson, who actually ran and hid behind a car. So he didn't even see that. He was behind a car. Yeah, there was a car that actually went right up and they kind of drove around the whole thing. Yeah, it's actually like reading a novel. It should be written as a novel in a way, but my point though is poetic truth completely hid everything. If you were there and you just stand, there's actually a hill right there by where the shooting happened. If you were just stand there and look down and see what happened, and then watch the media tell their story, you would have been like, whoa, okay, this is what's going on. Why are we making such liars out of ourselves?
Mhm.
Why are we willing to destroy a town? Not only that, but a town that has tried this stuff or making efforts to integrate. Ferguson actually modeled themselves after Oak Park in Chicago, which is one of the first communities to really integrate. So these people were trying to integrate. They had over 67% of the population was Black. There was a way for them to escape North St. Louis, get a home, and get out. And the media and none of them cared about any of the Black. They only cared about the activist and the narrative. And that's to this day, property values are down, everything down. The stigma is still there. And all for what? The poetic truth? Or for white people to say, we're good people, or for our country to prove that we are still systemically racist.
You know, it's interesting to talk about poetic truth and guilt. You mentioned a lot about guilt, both of you, but especially you, Shelby. And I often think there was racism used to be the biggest problem that this country, social problem that this country faced, but I now believe that white guilt and shame is the biggest problem because it's setting us up for this toxic, endless loop that's not going to create any path to racial healing. If anything, it's going to just completely destroy the social fabric of this country. And Matt Walsh, I saw a segment recently of, I think, an upcoming film he's doing, which he's talking to a very well-intentioned white woman, a parent, and he's talking to her about like, okay, explain to me the white supremacy and cultural appropriation. They're working through that. And she says, you know, if white children favor or dress up as their favorite white Disney characters, like the princess from Frozen, well, that's white supremacy. That's you know, that's the model of beauty that we're constantly imbuing, the white standard of beauty, white supremacy. However, if the same child decides to do the right thing and okay, I'll dress up as a person of color, I'll be Moana, you know, I'll get the Pacific Islander headdress and all of that, and you know, I will honor the fact that there are other standards of beauty. Well, that's called cultural appropriation. So if you're a white person right now, just saddled and it's just immersed in this guilt and shame, you can't win. No matter what you do, you will be deemed racist. And no matter what American society does, it's going to be deemed supremacist. So to me, this path is only destined to destroy all of us on both sides. It's just terrific.
Yes. Mhm.
But Ildi, I'd like to bring you into this discussion because you have an interesting connection. Now, as I'm sure everyone can see, you're not Black, you're not a person of color, but you are of Hungarian and Jewish descent, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And your family's experience decades ago, and even your recent experiences living in Haiti, have sort of informed the way you see race relations in the United States and helped you understand that we in America make certain assumptions and associations about skin color and whiteness that people outside of the US, no matter what race they are, they don't make the same assumptions and associations. And I wondered if you could talk more about that in your experience.
Yes, absolutely. Just a tiny little bit of correction, because you said when I lived in Haiti, I didn't live in Haiti.
Okay.
I traveled many times and I spent time in Haiti, but I didn't live in Haiti. So
All
I don't
right.
want anybody to come later and say, oh, she didn't even live in Haiti. No, I didn't live in Haiti.
Yes, fact check is-
But before I start that, let me reflect on something that Shelby said about victimhood becoming a person's power, because that's something that's very interesting to me to see coming from Hungary, right? So in our Eastern European history, And again, like there will be many people who just come up in arms and say, oh, this is not even Eastern Europe, this is like Central Europe. There are all these ideas about, like what's centrality, what's marginality, and all of that. I'm fine with saying they're from Eastern Europe. So in that area of the world, and particularly in Hungary, like that's what we grew up with a lot, right? So to somehow see yourself as a Hungarian, the victim of all kinds of different occupations. I don't want to use the word colonization because it was not classical colonization in the sense that it was, either in Africa or in the Atlantic world, but to be the victim of these different empires, starting from the Ottoman Empire, then the Habsburg Empire, then like the Nazis, and then the Soviets and all of that. So somehow you gained your identity as a Hungarian from being a victim of all of that and to resisting that, but resisting that through your victimhood. So when Shelby talks about, like victimhood being your power, like it resonates with me a lot. But what I have to say, like that kind of reaction in Hungary was considered to be a very conservative reaction. It was considered so, as opposed to the US, when this somehow is seen as some kind of progressive idea. To me, this is really, and again, like in the part of the world that I come from, retreating into your either national identity, your victimhood, in this part of the world, it's going to be racial identity. In other parts, it's going to be your religious identity. So to retreat into that and present that as the essence, and victimhood as the essence of who you are, that's a fundamentally traditionalist and sort of conservative idea, and something that has caused havoc on the continent many times, right? Because there it was not race, it was nationalism, or race later on with the Jewish question. So that is already one connection that I see there. How did I come into, that was the question, Monica, how did I come into contact with their work?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we'll have to go back a little bit. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I studied Africana Studies here in the United States at SUNY Stony Brook. I graduated in 2018 with a master's degree. And I didn't become an academic. I became a photographer. That was after I got my degree. We don't have to go into the details of that for this conversation. But in 2022, I sort of stayed in contact with the department, and I want to put this out like upfront, because I know that Africana Studies departments and just ethnic studies and all of that get a lot of bad press in the US currently, and not without reason. But I have to say, the Africana Studies department where I studied, I got a lot of opportunities. I'm not saying everybody was supportive, but as for me personally, they did give me a lot of opportunities, even though it was obvious that I'm not going to sort of go with the mainstream way of how we have to look at race, how we have to see this. What is it that you have to say as a guilty white person, as Shelby was talking about that. So in 2022, I was asked to teach a course, and the title was Themes in the Black Experience. This is for one semester, and Themes in the Black Experience, typically, if you look at the curriculum and what the curriculum is about, it's just going to be a very specific, the so-called progressive look at North American Black experience or North American Black history. That's what the course originally typically is about. And that was not something that I was really comfortable teaching for all of, the sort of racialized context that we unfortunately live in. But then I went to the chair of the department, who still currently is the chair of the department, as far as I know, and who's a person from Africa, so he's not African American in that sense. And I told him that I would be happy to teach the course if I can overhaul the curriculum. So if I can make it something that's different, something that's going to be a comparative course in the sense that it compares whatever could be construed as the Black experience. So not only the United States, but what I chose because of the field that I was in and sort of my expertise. So it was Haiti, Cuba, and the United States. So 3 focuses. And when I was teaching about the United States and the so-called Black experience in the United States, this is when I included the Shelby and Eli Still's movie, What Killed Michael Brown, in the curriculum. And I made the students watch the movie. I made the students watch an interview, which Shelby and Eli gave to Coleman Hughes. And then I made that part of the class discussion. So this is how sort of the connection came.
And Ildi, I'm just curious, how did your students receive this new approach to a discussion about race? I mean, it's pretty novel these days.
Yes, it was novel for them. So I have to say, I was lucky in the sense that this was a class of 50 students, so it was a relatively large class for a seminar format, which it was, right? So, and it was also my goal to make the students speak. I didn't want to just stand there and lecture, although I did a lot of that, because there was a lot of information that was missing. But I did want them to contribute to the class. So it was a class of 50 students, truly diverse, right? Not just in the generic sense of how we use that word in the United States today. It was truly diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of, like the students' background, also the background of like where they came from in terms of their discipline. So a lot of them were science, like hard science students. Some of them were humanities students. Some of them were Africana students. So there was a large variety.
Mhm.
And in the beginning of the class, I think I pretty much made it clear that this is going to be a class that's very different from what they are used to. And in the beginning, there was some hesitancy on their part. It was, and again, like think about this, this is 2022, so only 2 years after George Floyd and, everything that happened as a consequence of that. So there's a lot of carefulness, right? Like there is a lot of walking on eggshells, like what is it that I can publicly say in a classroom, what it is that I can't say in the classroom. As much as I was inviting honest conversation, and I did say things that, I think they didn't necessarily expect to hear in that context, it took them a while. But there were about, like, let's say a third of the class who were very open to this from the beginning.
Cool.
And I mean, the feedback, about like every 2 weeks, I ask the students for some feedback, informal feedback, not like written feedback. Just tell me what you feel, like what you're feeling about these classes. Is it something that you expected? Is it this is what you imagined when you registered for the class? And typically the answer was no. This is this is a lot more than what I imagined, because again, like they got a lot of art, they got a lot of history that's connected, again, even the fact that it was 3 different geographical contexts, and again, historical context, what's the difference? And what I did, I really went back to, in history, sort of even to before colonial times. So let's say, okay, let's compare. If we talk about Haiti, French colonies, what did the French colonies look like? What did, what was the social structure in French colonies? Was it the same as it was in the North American colonies? What was it in Cuba, right? Like how did that compare? The 3, how did they compare? Let's go back a little bit, like, even with Cuba, let's go back in history to the Iberian Peninsula. Where did the Cuban so-called colonizers came from? What was their ethnic makeup? What's their religious makeup? What was the history of the Iberian Peninsula? What's the history of North Africa? So all of that, the Arab conquest, and most of the students knew absolutely nothing about that.
Wow.
So I think it was, which is very interesting, right? Because they, not to mention Eastern European history, right? Like Eastern European history just does not exist in the mind of most North American students. And I'm not even trying to say that it should exist, because of course you cannot know everything. And I'm very aware that the school system, wherever you are in the world, right? Of course you're going to learn local history the most, or whatever is relevant to local history. But then to sit there and to say, oh, we have learned everything about white history or European history or whatever label they want to put on that, and then make judgments, make assumptions. Whenever you ask a question about those specific histories, right? Like, French colonial history, French, French sort of like mainland history during those times, not to mention the Spanish one, the Portuguese one, whatever. They absolutely know nothing. But they were very receptive. They were very receptive. They were very interested. I made them read 3 books during the semester. So we had literature, we had music, we had visual art. I'm a photographer myself, so I included a lot of photographs, and sort of connecting to Eli's work. Also, I included a lot of documentary, and I taught them how to sort of read documentaries, how to recognize what really is a documentary and what's a propaganda piece, right? Like where the line is between those two and how you can recognize that. And again, for most people, just the fact that actually documentaries are also scripted, that there is a script, that there are tools you use to create a documentary, even in the media, when you see a photograph, like how that photograph was taken, what's the line under that, what's the explanation, what's the perspective, what's the angle of the photographer, like all of these things, like we are creating that frame. So documentarians have a lot of power creating narratives, creating impressions. And most students don't even think about that because they're not photographers, or obviously. So when I started talking about that and showing them examples, one comparing the other, they loved it. There was a lot of interest. There was very little pushback, which I received, because there's always a few students who are, again, like first and foremost, either activists and then students, or very simply, they really never heard anything else than sort of the activist narrative. So there was pushback, but the majority of the students were very open. And going back to the conversation, which Coleman and Shelby and Eli had, or the movie, this is the first time that they said, you're showing us a lot of things that we thought were taboo to speak about, and you're showing us it's not taboo. Because when we talked about the United States and sort of like Black history in the United States, or the Black experience in the United States, I taught a lot of people and showed the opinions and the writings and conversations with a lot of people who are typically not shown in the field, and that includes Eli Steele, Shelby Steele, Coleman Hughes, Glenn Lowry, like people who sort of follow this. These names will be familiar to them. Aisha Takambi. I mean, that was an interview with Aisha on trigonometry, the very first interview they ever did. That was one of the most influential things that I think that the students reacted to. That was very beautiful. I don't want to leave people out. Sheena Mason, who you mentioned just before we started the conversation, Robert Woodson, Free Black Thought, right? Voices of Black Mothers United. So I showed all of these things. And when I told the students, I don't expect anybody to either agree with this or sort of say, okay, that is the truth, because there is no one truth, right? The whole point is that we cannot pretend that these thinkers who are, again, because we're in a racialized context, are Black, they don't exist, or that they somehow should be put to the sidelines of the field. And the students loved it, I have to say. So it was a very positive experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That gives us a lot of insight on your connection. I really appreciate that. And listening to what you were saying, LD, about history, and it occurs to me that the lack of a comprehensive understanding of American history and world history contributes to a lot of the poetic truth that Shelby writes about. And it reminds me in particular of the ignorance around African slavery. My son, who was in middle school when he was tasked, actually required to read Stamped, Ibram X. Kendi's version of Stamped for middle schoolers. And the book just really bothered me because it implied that slavery is a European creation, which it most certainly is not. Anyone who knows anything about world history knows that Muslims were the biggest slave traders in world history. And that the word slave actually is derived from Slav, who were supposedly one of the first victims of the slave trade, and they were enslaved to Muslims. And as we know, Slavs, the Yugoslavians are descendants of Slavs. They're white. They're not black. They're not people of color. And we often forget, because of we have a lack of understanding of world history, that the African slave trade with European slave traders could not have occurred unless African tribes sold their brethren into slavery. So that's an inconvenient truth that we don't like to talk about. So I'd like to take that, Shelby, and return to Michael Brown for a moment. And this is how it ties in. I'm going someplace with this, believe me. You pointed out the irony that there was this outcry over Michael Brown's death. Hands up, don't shoot. What a tragedy. Even as thousands of Black boys and girls in Chicago, let's say, were shot and killed in the South Side that same year, there was no outcry. So in America, it seems that we have such difficulty coming to terms with the fact that Black humanity can be ignored and minimized even in our race, and that Black lives only matter when they're taken by white people. But they seem to matter a lot less when they're taken by other Black people. And whenever I raise the issue of Black on Black crime, oh my God, I will not lose Black friends faster than if I do that. So I want to ask you, what is this dynamic that we have in the Black experience that we refuse to acknowledge or take responsibility or accountability for the way we treat our brothers and sisters?
You mean our white brothers and sisters, or
The Black on Black.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you know, how to I'm not sure where to start here.
Oh, okay. Jump in anywhere.
Well, I think again, the phenomenon that we don't want, that is interesting in our case, is that we're Americans and have been for generations, and going back to slavery, obviously, and forward. And that puts us in a kind of dual situation always. There's our Americanness. I'm red-blooded American. I grew up, I saw Clint Eastwood and all the movies, the Western movies, and you name it. And all the other kids I grew up with that's what we were exposed to, but we were segregated. And it gives you a kind of you have all kinds of feelings. One of which is that, well, you're not the real thing. You're not the real American.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who will say, well, if you're Black, I'm sorry, but you might, whatever, but you're not. The real American is white. That's the bigotry. And there is this sort of duality. And so the races are kind of divided up into power groups. And Blacks, our power is our victimization. We just, when white America in the 1960s, and I remember this very vividly, when they acknowledged that racism was an evil, that changed everything. Up to that point, racism is just matter of fact. It's just they live with it. But adding that moral dimension to it meant that if a white person, for example, said, yes, my God, you were really abused and segregated and mistreated and so forth, then that white person would in a sense be honored by being seen as innocent.
Mm.
And innocence is a power.
Mm-hmm. Innocence is a power
In itself. If I'm going to meet you and let's say a white person wants to meet, they will be nervous. They'll be expectant. What's this going to mean? Am I guilty? Well, again, what that means is that it reflects this sort of balance, range of power. And we in Blacks, I mean, one of the terrible things about segregation was that it left us underdeveloped. Our reading scores in Chicago today, 97% can't read at grade level. We are woefully underdeveloped. So we don't have much to bring to bear except that we're a problem to the larger society. And that's puts us in this again. So two blacks get together. I want to know, is the brother down? Is he really black?
Is he really black?
And I know what he says, but is he hanging out with the white boys? We have that power with each other. We want to know that of each other. Because we're together, we're trying to shake down the white man. So we're drawn in because of this alignment of power. We're drawn into wearing different masks, taking on, emphasizing different parts of our American experience that come to people who have our history of being oppressed. And oppression leaves its mark on us all in all sorts of forms and ways. I'll get into that later maybe, but at any point you get that duality that of experience that is a reflection of power. And so when I go around blacks or whites, I have to be respectful of that, of where they sit in this configuration of power.
Well, Shelby, this is a perfect lead in to the discussion we were having right before this webinar started. You're both biracial men, okay? Someone with a black parent, we each have a black parent and a white parent. So I'm curious how you've straddled the line, and you talked about, like, you know, people saying, are you black enough? What kind of black person are you? There must be a sense you've gotten, each of you have gotten, both of you gotten throughout your life, that one part of you is perceived as a victim and the other as an oppressor. So I'm wondering how you navigate this landscape, wearing those two. You're talking about wearing two faces and the masks, and I mean, where do you fit in? Because there, as I think I also mentioned, like biracial and multiracial children are the fastest growing demographic in this country. But in a country that's been mono-racialized, you're either black, you're white, you're this, you're that, we're not paying attention to that experience. So I want you each to speak to that. Like, what is it like for you as biracial men in this very strange landscape?
Maybe I'll let my son start.
Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
Well, my experience is different, obviously, because I was born in 1974. So you should say that I'm literally the first male going back who knows how far into slavery that was not born under oppression. I wasn't born under segregation. We were born 10 years after the first civil rights victory. And so I grew up very aware of the civil rights, all of that. I mean, my parents talked about that almost every dinner, almost every night at dinner time. So it's a big thing growing up. But for me, it was my parents. It was just organic that I came from a Jewish mother and a black father. I didn't even really look at them as, you know, Jewish mother or a black father. It was just a story. And my mother is the daughter of Holocaust survivors. And so obviously I came from a few different racial orders. People forget that Nazi Germany was a racial order too. And so for me, I just organically as a kid drew strength from both. And I happy to be born deaf. So I had my own struggle overcoming a hearing loss, a profound hearing loss. And hearing the fact that, you know, my Jewish grandfather survived 5 years, this year to be run all over around Europe by Nazis, Russian, and so forth. And slavery segregation on the other side. That sort of gave me the ability to go, you know, my problem. I figured they maybe I could overcome them. This bully or whatever it is, or learning how to speak better or whatever it was. So we used those stories as stories of inspiration. So it was just stories of victimization. It was like, hey, your people overcame all of this. So
Mhm.
you've got your problem. You're gonna have to figure out how to overcome that. If that's part of the legacy of the family. But that for me, it was a gift. It was a blessing. And I consider myself to be lucky because I do know a lot of people say, well, you speak very well. You have a lot of you can function in the mainstream society because you must have come from this family. And I go, well, my family really came from nothing. But my parents were together and my parents taught me the right values. So I don't think it had to do with money. Because I
Mm.
can tell you there were a lot of richer families, a lot of families with whites, they were richer. They did not have as much success, overcoming the disability. So for me, it was just and actually, to kind of wrap up, actually, my last story. So we would go out to dinner as a family, and often somebody would come over and go, "Oh, what a wonderful family." And I'd be like, "Why are they coming over and telling us, oh, it's such a beautiful family, a wonderful family?" And so my dad and my mom would have to tell us it's because we're interracial, it's
Mhm.
unusual, what's coming out of this. The people see it as the future, as something like that. And just, oh, okay, whatever. But then I guess to college, I just apply for, the college application. And all of a sudden, the system says, pick one. You gotta go with the one drop of black blood rule. And so I'm like, well, everybody's telling me I'm the future, but my government is telling me, no, we gotta go backwards to, basically, the one drop of black blood rule has been around since the 17th century. So you got one drop of black blood, you better pick that one because the serious stuff doesn't count.
Right.
And so that's why I was sort of like, okay, and that's why I really just kind of opt out of that whole system because I should say, you know what? I'm gonna hold on to what I was raised with. I'm not gonna betray those values. And I think that gives me the authority to have my voice today. And now these youths are being put into the right box. And so now people are just moving people around the boxes to serve whatever power they have. And that's why we have this whole mess after October 7. And if they keep getting worse, the longer we keep putting people into boxes. So that's sort of why I completely reject those boxes. So in other words, as my father was saying, I'm not really multiracial. I'm an American. I represent the best of America, the fact that people from all over the world could come into the country and produce a child like me. And that's something that I would never let go of because America made that possible.
Mhm.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Aldi.
Yeah, no, like it's about being an American or what does this represent and taking from everything that the people who came to this part of the world, and I don't just mean the United States, and take the best of that and use that and claim that as sort of like this is who I am or as the guiding force of who I am. Like this is something that I have seen in the Caribbean very much, right? And one of the things also that very much jumps out to me from the whole race conversation and my teaching or what I learned in Africana studies is that this word agency. So, it comes up a lot. And what does it mean to have agency as a person of color? And one of the things that I taught about Cuba, for example, and I mentioned the name of this musician because in my current project, I'm going to be working with him. His name is Elio Villafranca. And for me, his music represents absolutely that kind of agency. So not the agency that somebody is going to retreat into some kind of racial culture or ethnic culture or religious culture or whatever the division is, but he takes, like African music, Cuban music, which is already a merger, classical European music. He takes the piano, he takes the drum, he takes all of that. He takes jazz, American jazz, and then creates something new through that. And I showed his music in the class, and I asked the students, what do you hear when you hear his music? What is there? What is it that he's doing? And there were like all kinds of responses, what it was. And I said, no, this is agency. And I think for a lot of North American students, this is a completely new idea of agency, a new approach to agency, because again, here in this context, agency means that you're retreating into something that you perceive to be your traditional culture. But agency is not that. Agency is when you can, as exactly what Eli was describing here, when you can take all of what's available in your own background and create something that's yours. And this is agency.
Also,
I'm clapping
yeah,
my hands. You can't see me, but I'm clapping my hands. That's
Yay.
right on the money.
yeah, and also she came from the large American culture. I remember talking to my father, and she would play music all the time, and when next to my bedroom, I was deaf, so he probably thought he should play loud, but the walls would vibrate. But he would play what do you call white people music, like Rolling Stone, the Beatles. And I remember talking to him one time, and I said, "Well, how come you don't play black music?" He said, "Well, I play black music, but I also play everything because that's part of being American." That we could draw from everything. He would teach Bob Dylan in his university class. And so it's, this whole idea that you can borrow from other cultures, that you can do things. If you look in some of the greatest albums like Paul Simon, Graceland, when he went to South Africa, he used a musician. Paul Simon said that he would not be able to create that album today. So that's where we're going, and why are we giving powers to these people?
Mhm.
Well, the police. We are, in other words, exploiting these people. I guess there has been exploitation in the past, but there's ways to do things ethically. And so rather than figure out how to be ethical, figure out how to do that, we should shut it down. And we say it's racist, it's colonialism, Russian civilization is evil. And then nothing happened, and we become more divided. So I think with LD, I think the whole thing is just that's why I don't have a one culture. I have an American culture, and so that's why I feel free to borrow or be influenced by anything that comes across my path.
Can I jump in along those lines? It seems to me that the big word, it's a single word that explains what we're talking about at the moment, is the word identity.
Mhm.
And identity has been, since I can remember, a big, big, big deal in the Black American community. We sort of introduced that as a concept, a worldwide concept, that you are your identity. So and so is Black. We have a box for Black people. We have a box for Hungarian people. We have on and on. And we have made the profound mistake of mistaking our identity for ourselves.
Mhm.
I don't give a damn. I have no control over how Black culture evolves. I've enjoyed certain parts of it. I've defined myself in many ways through other parts of it, and it's been a conversation that I can have in American life. But the identity doesn't do any work. It doesn't come up with any new ideas. It doesn't win me this or that. And when you're in the hands of corruption, when people start to talk about identity, you know that's a front, a mask that they wear in order to manipulate, again, their own sense of entitlement.
Yes.
But identity is really a danger because we use our identity to escape the anxiety of being free, of having opportunity everywhere around us. That's frightening.
Yes.
And so the identity, which seems innocent, is the worst corruption Black America faces today.
Oh.
Don't be what's the students tell me, I have to be Black. Well, who told you that? What is that? That's an avoidance. What
Mhm.
they're saying is that we can avoid reality. We can avoid that by being Black. That's our defense against failure.
Yes.
It's not a reward for success. It's a terrible thing. I'm glad, of course, to hear Eli say that, but the American identity, which is open to everybody, is the one I want. I'll go to war for that. I identify with that in any way possible because it's open. It sees me as a human being,
Oh,
and an individual.
oh, I, I love that, Shelby. Oh my God, that gives me chills. Talking about this emphasis on identity reminds me that the much bigger story, the one you're touching on, the one we miss every day, especially as Black people, is the story of the human experience. That regardless of
There
what
you go.
race we are, we're all struggling with this. At various points in time in history, many members of many different races have been oppressed, have been enslaved, have been impoverished. This is not something that is uniquely Black. It's part of the human experience. So Ildi, I mention this because one of the themes in your work is this, you've been exploring, or you, I think, experience the limitations of defining art through the lived experience. You've talked about the pressure in higher education to only speak and teach about issues that relate to your lived experience as a white woman. Like, it's not appropriate for you to talk about African studies or, Haitian studies or something like that. However, I dare say a Black professor would not get flack for trying to teach Greek history. I think it's kind of a double standard. Um, but so your time in Haiti and your family history in Europe, it sounds like it's taught you that the most important, or I should say, the more important lived experience is not racial, but socioeconomic. Can
Yeah.
you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, yes. So it's not racial, it's socioeconomic. And as you talked, I was thinking about this. It's not even, I think maybe the way I would put this, that it's not defined by the differences. Differences are part of it. So clearly, Haiti did not have the same history as Hungary, but there are many connecting points. There are many similarities, as I said in the beginning, right? So, and it's not only Hungary or Haiti, like there are many other immigrant communities, immigrant people in the United States who share these experiences, which actually North Americans happen not to share. So the real connecting point is like whether you're an immigrant, doesn't really matter from which racial background, but an immigrant whose country, whose part of the world has been through these experiences. And what I mean by that, it's the experience of war. It's the experience of rebuilding after a war. It's the experience of living in a dictatorship, whether it comes from the left or the right. How do we do that? It's very interesting. Just today, I was listening to a conversation, actually a letter read by Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I don't know who's, yes, by Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And she was talking in that letter about her childhood in Somalia, particularly about the era when, when the communist regime in Somalia was in power, which again is something that most more North American students, when you mention to them, oh, themes in the Black experience, let's say, is communism a theme in the Black experience? Is it or is it not? And if yes, if no, then why not? And then you go through all of these countries in the African continent that experience that. So is it the Black experience? But that's sort of, it's like a side note that I just wanted to make. Where was I going with that? Oh, yes. So the similarities. So all of these, like losing your family members, your child. I mean, especially in my family's case, my uncle in 1968 swam through part of the Mediterranean Sea to go, to run away from Hungary. And the way he had to do that, because it was closed, Iron Curtain, if you try to cross the border, you will be shot at, all of that. So one theme, for example, that has interested me since the time that I had children, how did his mother feel about that? Because this happens at the time. I mean, she didn't even know, right? So before he left, he didn't tell her because he could have died very easily on the way. And one of his friends who went with him died on the way. He, in fact, drowned during, the crossing. So how do you feel about this as a mother? And she was not able to see him for, I believe, maybe 20 years because he was not able to come back and visit, and she was not able to go there. Like these kinds of experiences. So the experience of immigration, of distance, of loss, like these are the immigrant stories. And today in the American imaginary, these are all connected to skin color. These are all connected because that's what we see mostly in the media. And this is who most of the immigrants are today. But when I went to Haiti and I saw sort of how to work in a system, right? Like individual lives lived within the system of a country where, the government doesn't supply what you want, when there is no infrastructure, when life is difficult, just financially, right? When you go into the store and it's mostly empty. Like these are all when your family members had to leave because they go to the United States or they go wherever just to have a better life. And this sort of searching for a better life, which again in the US today is completely associated with people from the South.
Yeah.
This is the life that we lived for hundreds of years, right? Like this is the story of my family. So it was very easy for me to make connections over that. And not only for me, I mentioned that to you, Monica, in a different conversation. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who's a woman from Afghanistan, a Sikh woman from Afghanistan. Again, they ran away from Afghanistan during the Taliban, which came as a response to the Soviet occupation. So all of these things, like we know this, we connect over this, and this is not something that happened to us 400 years ago. This is something that happened to either, to her personally or to me through my family members, who are a lot of them still alive today. So these are connections. And then just to mention one more, and then I'll finish with that. Let's say a connection. Unfortunately, in Haiti over the past years, since the gangs have taken over in Port-au-Prince, sexual violence and the rape of women is really off the charts. So that's an unfortunate fact. Now, again, how do I make the connection? And through a friend of mine who I worked with there, I heard many of those stories. Unfortunately, even his wife was kidnapped. Not only once, she was kidnapped twice. People who were kidnapped together with her, they were raped. So when I hear all of these stories and you ask me, how can I connect? Well, the way I can sort of connect with that is because when the Soviets came and my grandparents, particularly my grandmothers, all of my grandmothers and their, like the women, the Soviets, basically the soldiers raped their way through the whole Eastern European front, right? And there's many literature where you can read about that. And even East Germany. So this is not only Eastern Europe, right? The part of East Germany that was occupied by the Soviets, like women lived through like sexual violence and rape the whole time. So this is not something that, like rape during a war situation, which in Haiti, I believe the gang situation is pretty much a war situation, right? It's a civil war kind of situation, but still. So what happens to the individual person? What happens to the civil population in these kinds of situations? That's a connection that we, and by we mean people who come from all of these backgrounds, can connect over. And North Americans don't really understand that.
Yeah. Oh, excellent point. Yeah, that goes back to the human experience. Yes.
Yes.
That common bond we all share. Hey, Ildi, since I think it's a great time to start taking questions as we
Yes.
get ready to close out. And now that I have you, can continue talking to you about this. Going back to Eli's film, What Killed Michael Brown, you showed that film to your students, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so one of the questions we have is, what was their reaction? What did they have to say about it?
To be honest, I think they were very cautious. They were also surprised, right? Like there were a lot of facts revealed in that movie, which obviously they were not aware of. Gosh, that was 2 years ago, so I'm trying to, like remember the conversation. I think what I do remember is that they found it very interesting. They did not reject the movie at all. Again, it was more sort of this sense of like, oh, I didn't think about this. And the experience of the people who were left in the town and how they talked about their life after the riots and after all of that, that made a big impression on them.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe, yeah, again, just the students' reaction. It's most of the time I didn't get a lot of pushback. There was a lot more sort of appreciation for the difference in perspective. I did get a lot of sort of like, you know, when I mentioned, let's say, the police statistics on, you know, the killing of unarmed Black or white men, or have white men ever been killed, just like George Floyd has been killed? And if yes, what does it mean? If no, what does it mean? If we don't know, what does it mean? So all of those questions that we went through, yeah, I did get a lot of the times, you know, certain students would just go and just fact check, like go online right away. You can see it, you know, the laptop is in front of them, they will fact check you. But they could never catch me to say something that, so I think it was a very good and open conversation. And again, I've made a point of emphasizing several times to the students during the semester, I don't want anybody to agree with me. That's not the point of me teaching the course. The point of me teaching the course is really for the students to be able to reflect on their own paradigm. And by that, I mean the North American paradigm. So what is the North American thinking paradigm? Why is it a racialized paradigm? And if we lean into that racialized paradigm, where is that going to lead us? I think maybe in one sentence, that was the goal.
Okay, one sentence. Okay.
I think that just to hit really quick, I think where we're going to go is race is going to fade away. Just fade away.
That would be great, right?
That would be lovely. I know that's
It
my
can't,
partner wants.
you can't stand.
You can't stand.
I hope you're right.
It just doesn't, there's no longer the kind of circumstances that would give it momentum, society would just immediately fall to pieces. So I think we, you know, for my advice to Black people who come from deprivations of one kind or another, forget about it. Move on. Become an American. Don't become Black. You're already Black, you'll die Black. Become an American who's aggressive, who wants to invent things, who wants a better, more equitable society. And so move in that direction. But to go back and be angry, that's going to be the kiss of death for Black people. It's an indulgence. It gets you nowhere and wastes your time.
I think it's a worthy ideal, Shelby, but I think we all know, everyone in this call knows that there are a lot of forces on both sides, and by both sides I mean Black and white, that are really invested in the power of the poetic truth. So it's gonna take a lot to sort of move us to a quote unquote raceless society. We have a question here that deals just with that. Someone asked, do you think eliminating race on the census is a worthy cause? I'm sure you think it's worthy, but is it likely?
Yeah, I mean,
Not for a while.
yeah. Well, if you look at it, you put all this data down, all these numbers, all these races, all this stuff, and my question would be is, what good has it done? A lot of times people let you stop in numbers and not move beyond the numbers. I mean, behind those numbers is human being. So if I put down that I'm multiracial, put down all the 5 things I am, what does that mean? What's the government going to do with that?
Yeah.
And they said, well, we have to allocate resources. We have to use this to make sure there's no racism and all of that. Well, we've been doing that for 70 years. And I can very easily tell you that in the south side of Chicago, in the neighborhood that I work in, that elementary school has 4% of Black kids doing math on grade level. In English is 6%. Then you go to East Palo Alto, which I was just recently there, A middle school is I think like 13% on reading level, 6% I think on math. So these numbers are being published. They are with all the data, with all the stuff that we use to figure out what the stuff is, and we don't do anything about it. So my question though is, are we actually using that data to prove systemic racism?
Mhm.
Are we using that data to look at the wrong problem, the wrong solution?
Mhm.
So I mean, that's a big thing is if the government wants to that's what one thing is the government literally has been a failure with this data. It has been a failure. I mean, the government, you have President Biden, every president comes in and goes, we want to fix the race problem.
Mhm.
And never, not one of them, Republican or Democrat, ever goes in there. These are public schools. A lot of them fall under some sort of federal or state oversight. And not one of them ever says, fire all these teachers, fire all these administrators. You are pumping illiterate kids into our capitalist society. We are going to fail. But let's collect the data. And so I'm just saying, if you want to mess over, my question though is also if you're a white person, why are you checking the white box?
Yeah,
It should be against you.
yeah.
And we should mind, so you're talking about a minor racial society. Which checking will give you information that is being used against us. White people are not benefiting from this. Black people are not benefiting from this. The only people that benefit are the ones that are in that middle area that collect the money. The administrators, the bureaucrat, yeah, the ones that have job in race job.
Or those who
But the
benefit
rest of
also, whoever benefits from division, and there are a lot of people right now who benefit from division, in my opinion.
yeah.
You know, before we end, there's a question we got that also relates to one I didn't get to. Shelby, when the poetic truth you describe, and also the poetic truth that you delve into in your film, Eli, reminds me a lot of The Fall of Minneapolis. And I don't know if either of you saw that. It was an excellent film that I watched with my family last year. And for viewers who don't know anything about it, it offers a much more in-depth and I think holistic perspective of the death of George Floyd. So as with Michael Brown, the film posits the narrative that was created immediately after Floyd's death, framed it as a casualty of racism, when in fact the circumstances were much more complicated. Just highlights are that Floyd had, as I recall, high levels of fentanyl and methamphetamine in his body immediately prior to his death. The coroner's report actually didn't indicate asphyxiation as a cause of death. And this is what surprised me most when you said the film shows like 20 minutes of body cam footage way before the footage. It starts way before the footage we've all seen of him on the ground with the knee in the neck. He repeatedly claimed he couldn't breathe from the moment he was first arrested and was standing upright. So I guess my question for both of you, for Shelby and Eli, do you think poetic license is a recurring theme in race relations? Is it just how race is defined now, only through this distorted lens?
Yeah,
I don't.
that's it. I think to make it really simple,
Yes.
race is poison.
Ooh,
Period.
okay.
Anytime, anywhere, under any whatever circumstances, race is brought into the picture. It is for ill gain, and never ever does it work out. Is it positive? You're looking at somebody who worked in 3 different government programs in the inner city in St. Louis and Salt Lake City, Utah, and some other places way back in the 60s and 70s. I saw what government programs are like, how they defeat people. And so within 10 years, they were knocking down these skyscrapers that they had built to save the poor people. They weren't saving poor people. They were giving white people some innocence after the 60s, after they were accused of racism. This is part of America too. So yeah, it is well,
poison. I think that's very powerful,
Yeah.
Phil.
And it's just poison. It's just, it won't be anything else. It may smell good, it might look good, it might taste good, it's poison. It's
And
always,
but it's like a drug. It's like a drug because you get it and you feel high, you feel
Yeah.
powerful.
yeah, I got a power here. I got a power as a black. I'm not going to walk away from power, but I need to walk away from power of race.
What's,
What's that?
interesting about that? What's interesting about that? George Floyd was the view sort of wrappy up Michael Brown when George Floyd happened. So like, oh my God. And uh, by all first account, it looks like, oh, this might actually go against the main point of our film because it was so graphic. You saw how everybody reacted. It was caught on video. It was like the perfect opposite in a way. And I remember it was my mother that said, let's raise 2 weeks. So we raised 2 weeks, and what happened was Al Sharpton comes along, and we show Al Sharpton 3 times in the film with Benji Hirsch, which was 1989, I think. The death of Yusuf Hawkins, and then we show him in Michael Brown. So repeat the same power formula where he comes in and basically you're all racist, all that stuff. And it's sure enough, he did the same thing with George Floyd. And so it was interesting for us to live through that real time just to see him come in and use that power again. So that's how it became relevant in the film. However, I got a lot of angry emails saying that the narration of my father was that Michael Brown was the victim of, the quote was indisputable police brutality. And that's what so I had to think about that, with the ball in Minneapolis. My thing is, okay, it was a controversial thing because I don't dispute this. Floyd was on drugs, that he could have died that day on his own.
Mhm.
However, and by the way, the footage they claimed it was new was already there. I saw the footage when I was editing What Killed Michael Brown. So I thought, yeah, so I had all that footage on me. I saw him from being handcuffed against the wall and walking all the way across the street, going on the pavement, through the car and out. I mean, that was all available. So that was not new in my view. But what comes to the issue was you cannot ignore the role of the police.
It's true.
When you are a police officer, you represent state power, and when you put your knee on the neck of somebody for 9 minutes, and that person dies during those 9 minutes. And you couldn't take any other action. I've talked to other police officers, and most police officers I've talked to was no, that would not be me. Now, obviously, we don't know how you would react in a certain situation, but they say you have option. You have to put your knee on the neck. You could try to save him. You could try to get him into the hospital or something. But no, he chose to put his knee on the neck. So that's why we don't, for us, for us, in terms of Michael Brown's situation, was not necessarily all the bad, but the bigger problem for us was how the left exploited this situation for massive power to remake our institution, to remake our educational system, a power that still lasts to this day. And so for us, that was the main focus, and that's what the death of George Floyd did. And so we should quibble about whether the police or whether other, but no, the lasting impact, the real problem here is the left exploited this death with tremendous power. I've never seen this before in my life. Even my own kids are affected by this power in this school. And that's the problem, and that's why we have bears. I mean, that's why we have organizations like this trying to fight this, trying to push back to more of a reasonable, reasonable America as opposed to be so racialized. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eli. Shelby, Ildi, did you have anything to add to that or?
No.
If you guys would, we're running out of time, but we have so many good questions. I'm going to try to consolidate them. If you can stick around for a little, we can get to them, if you don't mind. So first, I'm going to combine two questions. what can we do? Okay, in light of how DEI is being framed and taught in the educational system, what can we do to help improve our institutions? And what will it take to make the changes we're talking about and how we see race? And I think this comes from a sense of like this poison, this drug is being peddled to the most important generation, which is our younger generation, our future leaders, our future thinkers, our future educators. What can we do to detox America as soon as ASAP? Get us on, put us in rehab, race rehab.
Yeah, even Uncle Percy, I think the one thing you have to do first is you gotta get the ideology out. Because DEI, the problem with that is the ideology. It's an ideology that is looking for victimization in history. So you should try to tell me this DEI light, but you are usually race as the ways you look at history. And the question is, yes, Russian civilization, the horrible thing. Russian civilization was the monster in many ways. I mean, that's why some white people talk to me about how good the Anglo-Saxons were. And they use the word Anglo-Saxon. And I'm like, okay, the word is so good to my family. So you gotta look at both. You gotta look at history. You gotta look at both. And we should be able to look at history without trying to get one over another.
Mhm.
Oh, your people did this to us. And that's what we as adults are doing. We are giving our children weapons against each other.
Right.
We're having children going to the playground to say, oh, you are the oppressor, I'm the oppressed. There was even a multiracial family that I interviewed, and the child came home and asked the black parent, are you the victim and is daddy, the white parent, the oppressor? I mean, come on. And so that's what I would say is that it has to be all about history.
Mhm.
It has to be told with history, and also it's like the concept of the fallen in Christianity. We're all fallen people. We're all sinners. She really just take the concept of forgiveness and she completely throw it out the window. And I say that as somebody who comes from my history. I should have the right. I have the right to claim the most victimization.
Mhm.
But the Russian civilization, the principle of it, the American principle, freedom, liberty, equality, all of that are universal principles. We as human beings have failed them, but that doesn't mean that the principles have failed. And that's the lesson that we've lost today. The left is trying to destroy the principle because they believe it is the principle they have failed, but that's not true. The civil rights movement would have been a bloody revolution if those principles were not universal.
Excellent point, Eli. Excellent point. We often forget that. Civil rights movement was a huge success because it couldn't have happened anywhere else the way it did.
Right.
It could have been so bloody, but it wasn't because of our principles. That's such a great point.
Yep.
You guys, I'm going to bring in something that may seem a little unconnected, but illegal immigration. It's become a lightning rod issue in this election. I think it's something like 20 million immigrants have come in this country illegally in the last 4 years. And they're coming from all over the world. They're not coming from a single country. And I would say overwhelmingly, they are people of color. So the question is, do you think, and this is a question to all of you, just jump in as you see fit. Do you think that the influx of illegal migrants will help or hurt race relations in America?
Easy question, boy.
Oh, easy. Yeah, right. No softballs. Get right into it.
Yeah. No, it bothers me. I think it's our number one national problem at the moment, and it's going to 20 million people to absorb that many people. It's got to lower the level of excellence
Yes.
in your society, in your culture. Standards are going to be lower. Merit will be more and more neglected. And so it's what it does to the values we all have to live by as Americans
Mhm.
that I think is troublesome. I have not heard a single word from anybody in the government on how you're going to acclimate 20 million people into American society.
Yeah.
I just, it humbles me. We'll see how that happens, how that works out.
I have
The other side,
very
very quickly, I want to add one point in relation to what Eli said. I think in terms of what we should do in terms of school and introducing people to different backgrounds and all that sort of thing, that school should never cater to identity.
Mm.
They should cater to performance. Why does 97% of your kids in the school district can't read at grade level? Why?
Performance and individual needs, not needs
Yeah.
based on race, but the individual needs of the child.
That's so irresponsible. The whole system needs to obviously be torn down, rebuilt. But as a group entering the modern world after 4 centuries of oppression, joining this fast, highly developed, sophisticated society, we need a real focus where let us compete. In every institution we join, when you see us, raise the standards so
Yes.
we can meet those higher standards, and you have to look at us as real people. We have to prove that now after being held down for so long. Of course, for 4 centuries being held back, you're not going to come into the game with a lot to bear. Let's not lie about that to ourselves. Let's stop blaming our underdevelopment on systemic racism. The
Amen.
fact you can do, I went to one of the worst schools conceivable, but the parents, this is in the inner city, in the ghetto, in the 50s, but the parents closed that damn school down, got all the teachers fired, got this new superintendent, and said, you will teach our children. That's the American way of life.
Yeah.
Why do we
Yeah.
think we got to get more money out of the school system? We're at this moment, sadly, a lost people. We're confused about our situation. We spend so much time trying to milk the system for what it can give us that it just turns us into a race of hustlers. I want a race of excellence, where I go in to the hospital and I see the doctor and it's black. I don't fall to pieces. I say, thank God.
Sylvia, okay, go ahead.
Can I jump in for a second on that and the immigration and all of that? Because you asked whether it's going to complicate or sort of, I think that was the question, whether it's going to complicate the racial question.
Yes. Or help.
It's definitely going to make it more nuanced, but just 2 thoughts, which are sort of more from anecdotal personal experience. So one of them is that most of the immigrants that I know from either the Caribbean or recently I met for the project actually that I'm working on. So I started meeting in New York who are recent immigrants from Africa. And not a single one of them comes here with the idea that they are owed anything by the system.
Mm.
So what Shelby and Eli are talking about this, wanting to achieve and wanting to advance themselves in life through their work, through their own achievement, through improving themselves. That's basically the idea that they come with. That's their idea as Black or whatever persons they are. At the same time, and that I don't know if that's going to make it worse or better, or how that's going to influence the racial aspect of this question, but just last weekend, I was in Hoboken because my daughter is in college there, but also New York City. You walk around New York City, and if you actually start looking like who are the bicycle delivery people, and sort of, so you see this sort of multicultural, and it's not white America, it's really multicultural sort of middle class or upper middle class America.
Mhm.
And then you have the recent African immigrant delivery people, most of them who are illegal, And I was asking myself, like, this is the next underclass in the making.
Yes.
So how is this going to work out, right? Like, what kind of options can we offer them? What kind of real jobs are they going to have? Because how do you even make money on the long run? You know, like, how do you, especially in places like Hoboken or New York City or extremely expensive places? And it's happening. This is what's happening. And the options they have are very limited. And I know personally some of them, and they work, you know, either in Central Park as pedicab drivers, or most of them really just do delivery. And it's very difficult to watch how they live.
I
But
Go ahead.
that's also the American way. I worked in slaughterhouses every summer, put myself through college. I drove a city bus in Chicago. Those
Yes.
you know, mommy and daddy told me what counted and what didn't, what was expected and what wasn't. And my father used to say, my father had a third grade education, by the way, that was it. But he made it clear, when you go to college, you be a pirate. You take everything you can find.
take everything you can find.
And you're right about that. And actually, my ex-father-in-law, who was an immigrant from Hungary, right? My ex-husband's father, that's why ex-father-in-law, that's why I said, he went through the same thing. You know, it again had nothing to do with skin color. He, you know, as an engineer, you know, with a degree and everything, he started working in like a factory, just like burning the paint from cars. And he did that for many years. So I understand what you're saying, obviously. And I think one of the points I was trying to make is that these people, they do come in with this kind of attitude that, yes, I am ready, I'm willing, I want to do this. At the same time, because of the numbers, the quantity of the people who are already here, the opportunities, that's at least, again, it's anecdotal, that's just what I see from my conversations with, you know, the recent African immigrants. The opportunities are very, very limited. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see how this is going to work out.
I think that
I was-
what we're
I was
missing,
saying,
what needs to be considered here is that the America today economically is not the America
Yeah.
of 50 years ago or even 40 years ago. And this country was built on immigration, legal immigration, coming through the front door for a reason, because it allowed us time to acclimate. It allowed us time to build infrastructure. It allowed us time to prepare so that these groups could assimilate culturally and economically. Right now, I mean, I really dig into numbers, guys. We are running up $1 trillion in US debt every 100 days. That's something that that no one is mentioning on the campaign trail.
It's going to catch up.
The inflation is insane. So Ildi, with all due respect, I know this is a country that's built on hardworking immigrants. And there's no doubt in my mind that a large number of the people who are coming to America now, those 20 million we're talking about, Shelby, they are looking for the American dream that is no longer possible for the vast majority of citizens who were born here. That is the inconvenient truth. Now, how I think this will affect race relations. Black people, my people, a lot of the racism we've experienced is because of class. You know, long after the Civil Rights Act or
Oh my goodness.
it's class. And I live in Montana with a lot of poor white people, whether you're white, black, red, or brown. If you don't have money, you will face a lot of discrimination. And my concern is that if all these people of color are coming, not being able to get the opportunity that they're hoping for, they're going to be in the lower class, and there's going to be a perception. People of color, lazy, can't work. And you know, when you're in a lower class, you naturally turn to crime, whatever your color, whatever your skin color. I think it's going to be detrimental to race relations. That's my long way of saying it.
Eli.
I was there
Hope
one
you're
day
wrong.
Okay.
in Monterey, California. There's a town called Seaside, and we lived in Monterey for I think almost 30 years. My parents did. When you go Seaside, historically it's a black neighborhood. His fourth ward is my nephew. So the men were in the military, the wives were like the domestics for the Pepper Beach families. So historically it's been black. When we moved there, and by the time my parents moved out, it was all Latino and thriving. So what happened to the black people there? Well,
Yeah.
property values went up. They got money, so they moved. They moved to Baker. They moved out. And it kind of broke it. And now that's my big question for the South Side of Chicago. So I work with a guy named Pastor Bush, and right now he got a lot of Venezuelans in there. Now there are in North Chicago in the Biggie on the corners. They get money because they make so much money standing on the corner with the hand out. But however, on the South Side of Chicago, there are a lot of hard workers. They're already working. He already has hired at least 2 or 3 of them to clean his church,
Really?
replacing black people already. And the daughter of one of them asked him to walk her to her first day of school. So they're becoming part of the community. It's already happening. So the question though is, will this going to the South Side, will it force a healthy competition? Because hey, American, not everything given to you. So in other words, you've got the class of people that are coming in and they're on the bottom in their own countries. So for them, you go to the South Side, they see opportunity.
Mhm.
I mean, and I'm just saying they're so low on the ground. They're coming from a socialist country. I remember going to South Side for the first time and going, my God, look how nice these houses are. In LA, the houses are so small, but they're worn down, they're beaten down. But they're right next to the University of Chicago. It's not like you're isolated from civilization. So my point is, I think these people are going to come in, and yeah, I think that people have the argument on all sides of it, but there is a group. There should be a healthy number of these people who are going to make something out of it. And
Yeah.
so we have a legal pathway or not, I don't know. But the solution is,
Well,
but they're be working. They're already one of them already got a car.
yeah.
Wow.
Half a year in America, job in a car.
Wow.
Well,
Um,
it's when they come to America these days, they are taught to join dependency.
mhm.
They're to argue dependency and to say that if you don't give us a whole bunch of things, you're racist. They came here, they're working us over.
Well, they're getting free housing. I mean, there are people, I mean, I go to LA.
$150,000 Nancy Pelosi wants to give them to buy new houses.
Buy new houses. But if you were born here, you're in danger of losing your own house that you worked hard to make a down payment for. No, you're right. We're encouraging an entitlement mentality, or the government is an entitlement mentality among immigrants when, historically immigration in the United States has been built on, come work hard and make the American dream yours, not just come and show up and we'll put you up in a luxury, apartment and give you a stipend. I mean, it's welfare for it's so backwards. It's so detrimental.
It hurts everybody.
Hurts
It gives these newcomers the wrong idea.
Yes.
That what you do in American life is play the game, is work people over, find their guilt, and just
Yeah.
push that button, and you'll get a lot more than you you will if you don't.
Oh,
What bothers me is we can't. This conversation is wonderful. How many people are going to hear it?
oh well, I'm not going to give you the metrics right now, but we've got a couple, almost a few thousand listening. I mean, and we'll share it. We'll
God
spread the
bless.
word, Shelby.
God bless.
With, and with Eli's social media network, we'll make it happen.
Here we
Anyway,
go. Here we go.
you guys, we've gone way over our 90 minutes, and I thank you so much for indulging us all. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for your time in the middle of the day. I know you're all busy. And thank to all of our viewers for tuning in for this. I hope you found this discussion as exciting and compelling as I have. And please be sure to share it when we get it up on YouTube. And as a final point, I'd just like to remind all of you watching, as I always like to, that FAIR operates entirely on your goodwill donations. And so we do this, we're able to do the programming we do and to create these conversations because of generous gifts from people like you who are watching. So if you appreciate the work we do and you want to help us keep doing it, which I know you do, please consider donating to FAIR and subscribing to our newsletter and our Substack. You can donate to us at www.fairforall.org/donate. the final backslash. And I think Gavin is going to drop a link to our newsletter and Substack in the chat. And if he does not, oh, yes, he did. He dropped it in. Perfect. Anyway, thanks again to all of you, Shelby, Eli, Ildi, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event. And God bless America. I know that sounds a little too patriotic these days, but I can't help feel that way. Shelby,
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like that.
Thank you for the invitation, Monica, and thank you for FAIR. Thank you
Oh,
for FAIR. Seriously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for these conversations.
Thank you for inviting the old people like me. See,
oh, you're the old
represent-
person. Okay, I didn't know you were talking.
I'm the one.
Okay.